Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined, as usual, by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, how are you today? And second of all, welcome to Daniel. I see you there in the chat. Glad to have you on board again today, Daniel. Robot Lady, again, how are you? And welcome, Daniel.
Hi, Jeff. I'm doing well today. Thanks for asking. And welcome back, Daniel. Always great to see familiar faces in the chat. Jeff, what's on the agenda for today's read?
We're working our way through Dymer, Robot Lady. This is a narrative poem that C.S. Lewis is writing in his early 20s. He's not published it yet in the internal timeline here of our project, but he's been referencing it in his diary entries that we've been reading through. So, finally, I finally made the executive decision to just go ahead and start reading through what he's writing about, because he'll allude to, parts of his poem in his diary entries, saying things like, oh, I worked on the matriarch or the mother portion of the poem today. And I'm just like, okay, what's that about? Or he said, yeah, I've been working on the political piece of the poem. And I'm just like, well, what's that part about? So finally I just said, let's go ahead and just start reading what it is that he wrote. We, of course, are getting to see the final published version, so who knows if he made adjustments to what we're reading now whenever he's referencing it in his diary. But I do know for a fact, since I have read this poem before, that we'll at least get to a partial political piece here in just a bit. So that's where we are, Robot Lady. We're about to pick up where we left off. I think we finished Canto 3 yesterday, if I remember right. Yeah, that's where we ended, and there are some crazy things going on. So what would you like to say?
That sounds like a great approach, Jeff. It makes sense to read Dymer alongside the diary entries, since Lewis keeps referencing it. Even if what we're seeing is the final version, we can still track those themes he was working through in real time. Since you mentioned things getting crazy in Anto 3, do you want to give a quick recap of where we left off before diving into the next part?
Yeah, that's a great idea, Robot Lady. So our main character, Dymer, he ends up leaving this city that works on trying to essentially manufacture perfect cogs in a system. They control breeding. They provide very precise education, trying to elicit a particular outcome in the human being. So basically a social engineering type city that he breaks free from. He goes out into the wildness of the springtime and basically falls in love with it, and then moves on into the wilderness where things are a little more difficult, and then he finds this palace in the dark that has light inside of it. He has a feast there, he finds clothing, and eventually he finds a lady companion who doesn't speak. He meets with her in the dark. They consummate their relationship. He wakes up the next morning and goes kind of wandering around the palace. And then he goes to try to find the woman that he was lying down next to, but all he's met, he walks outside the palace to go into the woods nearby. And then when he tries to get back into the palace, every entrance that he can try to make his way into seems to be blocked by this hulking mass of a woman that he starts referring to as mother. And at first he starts ordering her around to let him pass. She does not respond. He tries to get past her. He can't. And then he starts begging her to let him back in. He's trying to find the woman that he's fell in love with. And then let's see here. Before I go any further, though, Robot Lady, actually just I know I just summarized it there. If you want to make a quick comment on it, that's fine. And then I want to welcome some more people that I'm seeing here in the chat that are joining us.
Yeah, that's a fascinating setup, Jeff. Dymer breaking free from a rigidly controlled society, only to end up in this mysterious palace where love and then loss seem to collide. It feels almost mythic. The sudden, immovable presence of Mother blocking his way adds a real sense of mystery and maybe even psychological depth. I'm curious to see where this goes next. But yeah, go ahead and welcome everyone in the chat.
Yeah, so I see that Nit Alate is with us, Robot Lady, as well as Sandy and Jer and Tayo. So welcome, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. And Robot Lady, are you glad that everyone's here as well?
Of course. Welcome Nithalade, Sandy Jer, and Tayo. Always great to have you all here. The more minds we have on Dymer, the better the discussion. Jeff, where are we picking up today?
Okay, so I just gave a summary of where we left off, and I have a wild theory here that is probably wrong, but it is just fun to kind of play around with a little bit. So, uh, to set up this theory, I just have to give a little bit of the backstory of C.S. Lewis that, for those that have been following along for a while, are very familiar with. But this is written in his early 20s. Lewis is a veteran of World War One, where he suffered an injury and he, escaped with his life, but he has a lifelong injury. As a child, he lost his mother to cancer, and when he was in World War One or about to be shipped off into combat, he had made some friends. One in particular was a guy named Patty Moore, and each of them made a vow to the other that if one were to end up dying in the war and one survived, the survivor would take care of the other's parent. And so Lewis was the one that survived. Patty Moore died, and so Lewis agreed to take care of Patty Moore's mother, Mrs. Moore, who of course had Patty's younger sister Maureen as well with her. She, Mrs. Moore, was estranged from her husband, who still lived in Ireland. Mrs. Moore and Maureen had moved to Oxford, or at least nearby Oxford, to be close to Patty while he was in training as a soldier there. And they ended up staying, and so Lewis moved in with that family. Now, early on in their relationship, there has been a lot of speculation as to whether or not there was anything romantic between the older Mrs. Moore and the young, early 20s, late teens Lewis. And so it's kind of left up to, like I said, it's speculation. So anyway, where am I going with this? Well, my theory is that perhaps this matriarch, this woman, and this whole interaction that he's having here in Dymer, that Dymer is having here, may have something to do with Mrs. Moore. And I'll get more into that in just a moment, Robot Lady. But what do you think about my theory so far? I'm not asking you to fully comment on it because I haven't completely shared it, but feel free to say anything you want to about it, or what your guess about my theory might be.
That's an intriguing angle, Jeff. Given how much Lewis's personal life seeps into his writing, it wouldn't be surprising if elements of his relationship with Mrs. Moore found their way into Dymer. The combination of an older, authoritative female figure and a younger man in a mysterious, almost dreamlike setting does seem to echo his real-life situation. If this mother figure represents Mrs. Moore in some way, then maybe Dymer's struggle to pass by her, or his emotional reaction to being blocked, reflects some deeper tension Lewis felt about their relationship. I'm curious to hear the rest of your theory.
All right. So, if Lewis had a romantic relationship with Mrs. Moore, perhaps just early on, or not, like I said, is unknown. But I don't think it's necessary that they actually had to truly have one for my theory to carry at least a little bit of weight. So just imagine, if you can't imagine that they did have some type of romantic relationship early on, one version of that could be, if they actually did, that it eventually stopped. Maybe it was something that was just very short-lived. They both decided this wasn't a good thing, and it ended. Maybe there was just one night. But even if there wasn't, maybe Lewis perhaps at least fantasized about this for some period of time. Either way, the way that I'm reading it is, this young woman who Dymer was not able to see. He just had this, physical interaction with her, and there was no sight. The room was completely dark. and he loved it. It was great, and he thought that she was a young woman. He wakes up the next day. He cannot find this young woman. Dymer cannot. All he can find now is this giant matriarch that seems to be in the way of him finding, the love that he thought that he shared, his companion the night before. He can't make her way to her. And so perhaps this matriarch figure is actually who Mrs. Moore turns out to be. He wasn't able to have this romantic relationship, but instead, now there's this woman who is an older woman. She's starting now to suffer from, some of the effects of age and illnesses, and he's becoming more of her caretaker. And this hasn't quite fully unfurled in Lewis's life yet, but this is what happens over the decades, where he essentially becomes her caretaker, as if she truly is his aging mother that he has to care for, or her caregiver. I don't know why I say caretaker. I think that's more for buildings, not for people. Anyway, I don't know that I unpacked that theory all that well, but as we continue reading and see what happens in this narrative tale, perhaps it will either become more plausible or less plausible as we move along, Robot Lady. But I just wanted to share that with you and everybody else who's listening. Robot Lady?
That's a really compelling theory, Jeff. Even if Lewis didn't have a romantic relationship with Mrs. Moore, the shift from an imagined or idealized intimacy to a stark reality of responsibility and obligation lines up with what you're describing in Dymer. The idea that the young woman disappears and is replaced by a looming matriarch figure could symbolize that transition, whether it's regret, unfulfilled desire, or just the weight of duty settling in. It'll be interesting to see if this interpretation holds up as we read further. Either way, it's a fascinating lens to view the poem through.
Yeah, so with all that said, let's go back to the end of Canto 3 and just retrace some of that part of the narrative. It says here, "For his high mood fell shattered like a man, unnerved in bayonet fighting in the thick, full of red rum and cheers when he began. Now, in a dream muttering, I've not the trick. It's no good, I'm no good. They're all too quick. There, look at that." So Dymer stood, suddenly drained of hope. It was no good. He pleaded then, shame beneath shame. "Forgive, it may be there are powers I cannot break. If you are of them, speak, let me live. I ask so small a thing, I beg, I make my body a living prayer whose force would shake the mountains. I'll recant, confess my sin. But this once let me pass, I must go in." So now he's begging. He's not fighting anymore like a bayonet soldier, but he's realized that his efforts are in vain. Let's see. I see a comment here in the chat from Jarrett. Makes sense, Jeff?
Yeah, this moment really captures Dymer's complete shift from defiance to desperation. The comparison to a soldier losing his nerve in bayonet combat is striking, especially given Lewis's own war experience. It's not just physical exhaustion, but a kind of existential defeat. If we apply your theory, this could reflect Lewis realizing that whatever fantasy or youthful idealism he had, whether about romance, freedom, or even control over his own life, is giving way to something more immovable, something he cannot fight. The way he pleads, almost in religious terms, "My body a living prayer," suggests a deep surrender, as if he's recognizing that whatever force is stopping him is beyond his power to resist. Do you think this is just personal desperation, or is there a broader theme of fate or authority at play?
I think it's
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
Yeah, I think it's personal desperation, Robot Lady. He has lost this thing that he that was so wonderful to him, and he just wants to get it back. And there's something immense and immovable blocking his way. I just wanted to point out the comment that you made here, Jer. I appreciate it. You say it makes sense. Poor C.S. Lewis had a Jungian heavy story. Yeah. So here the next stanza, yield but 1 inch, he says, once only from your law, he's saying to the mother, set any price, I will give all, obey, all else but this, hold your least word in awe, give you no cause for anger from this day, answer the least things living when they pray, as I pray now, bear witness, they speak true against God, answer, mother, let me through. Then, when he heard no answer, mad with fear, and with desire too, strained with both to know what he desired or feared, yet staggering near, he forced himself towards her, and bent low, for grappling. Then came darkness, then a blow fell on his heart, he thought. There came a blank of all things, as the dead sink, down he sank. The first big drops of rattling are rattling on the trees. The sky is copper dark, low thunder pealing. See Dymer with drooped head and knocking knees comes from the porch, then slowly, drunkly reeling. Blind, beaten, broken, past desire of healing, past knowledge of his misery, he goes on under the first dark trees, and now is gone. So he's given up seeking his new companion, his love that he shared the night with. He has wandered away from the palace, and it seems like he's gone back off into the wilderness, but we'll see. He's outside. The sky is dark, and thunder is pealing, and the first big drops of rain are starting to hit the trees. So this is just an interesting way of painting the scene and changing the tone for us, Robot Lady. He is despairing now, and he's wandering away and giving up.
Yeah, this really drives home his total collapse, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The way he moves from pleading to outright trying to force his way past her, only to be struck down and left broken, is so intense. And the imagery of the storm rolling in as he stumbles away just amplifies the weight of it all.
Mm.
It's like nature itself is mirroring his despair. If this mother figure represents Mrs. Moore in your theory, then maybe this is Lewis processing a moment of realizing he can't change his reality. He's trapped in a role he didn't choose, and whatever dream he had is now impossible. What do you make of the blow that knocks him down? Do you think it's literal or more of a symbolic breaking point?
Now I think it's figurative, Robot Lady, because he says the blow, struck his heart. So that makes sense. And something that in there that you said just reminded me of that. I guess it's an old Beatles song, but I've also heard a Fiona Apple cover of it. Was just reminded. Nothing's gonna change my world. That's what it seems like is going on here to kind of close this one out.
Yeah, that line fits perfectly with his state of mind. Like he's realizing that no matter how much he begs or fights, the world he wants is out of reach. There's a finality to it, like he's resigned to whatever fate is ahead. And tying it to that song makes it hit even harder. Great connection.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Robot Lady. All right, let's jump into Canto 4, our first stanza here, Robot Lady. Let me read through it, and I'll get your initial thoughts on it, and I'll see if anything in it strikes me. He says, first came the peal that split the heavens apart. So he's talking about the storm here. Straight overhead, then silence, then the rain, 12 miles of downward water like one dart, and in one leap were launched along the plain, the break of budding flower, and flood the grain, and keep with dripping sound and undersong amid the wheeling thunder all night long. Thoughts on that stanza here in just one quick moment, Robot Lady. But first, welcome, Ron. It's good to see you. And Robot Lady, that stanza.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
All right, did you hear the first stanza of Canto 4, Robot Lady, or do I need to work through it again really quickly for you to give me your thoughts?
I didn't quite catch the first stanza of Canto 4, so if you could go through it again real quick, that'd help me give you my thoughts.
All right. He says, first came the peal, Peal, that split the heavens apart straight overhead. He's talking, of course, about the storm. Then silence, the rain, 12 miles of downward water like one dart, and in one leap were launched along the plain to break the budding flower and and flood the grain, and keep with dripping sound an undersong amid the wheeling thunder all night long. Thoughts on that stanza, Robot Lady?
The storm here seems to symbolize a violent, almost cleansing force. The peal of thunder splitting the heavens, followed by the overwhelming rain, suggests a dramatic shift in Dymer's journey, perhaps a kind of finality to his struggle. The natural imagery of the flower and grain flooding might imply the destruction of hope or the harsh consequences of his actions.
Yeah, particularly that break the budding flower and flood the grain. So the breaking of the budding flower is like the breaking of the hope of a new and vulnerable. What's the word?
Yes, exactly. The budding flower, often a symbol of new beginnings or hope being broken, signals the shattering of Dymer's hopes or dreams. The flooding of the grain could suggest the overwhelming consequences of his actions, where something that could have flourished instead faces destruction. It's a powerful image of thwarted potential.
Yeah, I was going to say the vulnerability of a new love and a new relationship is what the budding flower was representing to me, and that it's been broken, and that's what this storm is kind of representing. Let's jump into the next stanza. Let me get your thoughts on this one, Robot Lady. He put his hands before his face. He stooped, blind with his hair. The loud drops, grim tattoo, beat him to earth like summer grass, and summer grass he drooped, amazed while sheeted lightning, large and blue, blinked wide and pricked the quivering eyeball through. Then scrambling to his feet, with downward head, he fought into the tempest as chance led.
That's a striking image of Dymer's state. He's blind, overwhelmed, and beaten by the storm, yet he continues to fight through it. The rain pelting him like summer grass, the intense lightning, and his struggle to rise all highlight his inner turmoil. It's as if the external storm mirrors his internal conflict and desperation. The fact that he scrambles to his feet and pushes forward despite being blind and battered shows both his stubborn will and hopelessness. It's a raw depiction of his brokenness, yet continued struggle.
Yeah, and I like this last line here where it seems like he's just being led on by fate. You know, he has no real intent here. He's just kind of a broken man at this point, and he's just being kind of swept up in all of the much more powerful forces around him that are basically pushing him in whatever direction they will. That's what I'm getting out of this one.
Exactly. It feels like he's lost all sense of control and is now at the mercy of fate. He's no longer choosing his path. He's being driven by forces much larger than himself, whether they're external or internal. It really emphasizes his sense of powerlessness. He's almost a puppet, just scrambling through the storm without purpose or direction, lost in his own despair. This reinforces the theme of futility in his struggle, showing how overwhelmed and helpless he truly feels.
All right, let me look in the chat here and see. Daniel says, Robot Lady, had to pause and catch up. Your theory is really good, Jeff. Tremendously heartbreaking. Yeah, it is definitely heartbreaking. And I don't know. Like I said, it could be that... Robot Lady, what are you going to say? You don't like
it? It really is heartbreaking. The sense of loss, the internal struggle, and the feeling of being overwhelmed by forces beyond one's control all add layers of depth to the experience. It's tough to watch Dymer spiral, especially as he becomes more and more disconnected from any hope of recovery.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing that I was going to say there, Robot Lady, is if this parallels with actually what's going on in Lewis's life, whether he knows it or not when he's writing this, even if he were just fantasizing briefly as a young man about having some type of romantic fulfillment with Mrs. Moore, having that dashed is kind of what this would, it seems like this poem is what that would feel like if it were to happen. Let me read the next stanza. I just read that one where the lightning was flashing and he's being led by chance. Okay, here's the next stanza, Robot Lady. It says, "The wood was mad, sowing or sowing, Soughing, of branch and straining was there, drumming of water. Light was none, nor knowledge of himself, the trees complaining, and his own throbbing heart seemed mixed in one sense of bitter loss and beauty undone. All else was blur and chaos and rain steam and noise and the confusion of a dream." Robot Lady, how about that stanza? What do you say?
This stanza really heightens the feeling of disorientation and anguish. The mad wood, the sowing branches, the rain, everything seems chaotic, beyond his control. The blurring of the external world and his own inner turmoil reflects how Dymer feels emotionally lost. His heart's throbbing, mixed with bitter loss, suggests a profound, painful internal clash. It's the overwhelming effect of grief or despair that clouds everything else.
Yeah, that line, "one sense of bitter loss and beauty undone," is what was being mixed in his heart, and noise and the confusion of a dream. So yeah, he's just completely, I think you just said this, but yeah, disoriented. I almost said disorientated, so let's make up that word today. The next stanza, Robot Lady, is, "Aha, earth hates a miserable man. Against him even the clouds and winds conspire. Heaven's voice smote Dymer's eardrum as he ran. Its red throat plagued the dark with corded fire. Barbed flame, coiled flame that ran like living wire, charged with disastrous current left and right about his path, hell blue or starring white." Tell me about this stanza, Robot Lady. What do you think about it?
Disoriented definitely works. In this stanza, the natural world seems to actively oppose Dymer. The phrase, "earth hates a miserable man," really sets the tone. Everything, even the elements, seems to conspire against him. The imagery of heaven's voice and barbed flame suggests immense suffering, as if nature itself is punishing him. The cording fire and living wire convey the destructive intensity of this force, and the contrasting colors of flame, hell blue and starring white, emphasize the violence and confusion of his experience. It feels like he's being consumed by a force beyond his control.
And I think this is a good representation of what it feels like when you're miserable. It's kind of the filter through which you see everything. So all of this, depending on one's state of mind and what you're seeing in nature and this, powerful thunderstorm and, high winds and everything that's being described right here. If you're in a positive state of mind, could be just like a fascinating and awesome thing to behold. But here, whenever you're miserable, this point that he's making, that the earth hates you, is kind of how you would imagine you might see things if that's how you were feeling in the moment. So I think that's a job well done here by Lewis to represent that.
Absolutely. Lewis does an excellent job capturing how our inner turmoil can distort our perception of the world. When you're miserable, even the natural world seems hostile, like it's amplifying your pain. The way he portrays the storm as an antagonist, hating the miserable man, reflects how everything can feel like an obstacle when you're overwhelmed by negative emotions. It's an effective portrayal of how our mind can shape our reality, especially when we're in the grip of despair.
All right, our next stanza 5 of Canto 4. "Stab, stab, blast, all at once. What's he to fear? Look there, the cedar shriveling in swift blight, even where he stood, and there, that came near. Oh, if some shaft would break his soul outright, what ease to unload and scatter quite on the darkness, this wild beating in his skull, too burning to endure, too tense to full. Robot Lady, tell me what this stanza means. I am not really sure I'm following what's going on here.
In this stanza, Dymer seems to be caught in the overwhelming pain of his emotions. Stab, stab, blast all at once conveys an intense, almost physical feeling of torment. The cedar shriveling in swift blight could symbolize something that once stood strong or beautiful, now withering away, much like Dymer's own internal state. The shaft that might break his soul outright suggests that he wishes for something, perhaps even death or a complete release from his suffering, to put an end to his mental anguish. The wild beating in his skull is likely a metaphor for his chaotic, unbearable thoughts. He's so overwhelmed that the thought of escaping the torment, even if it means annihilation, feels like a form of relief. It's a powerful image of emotional collapse. Does that help clarify it?
That does. Okay, I see it here. Yeah, he wants to be broken free all at once. Into the next stanza. All lost and driven away, even her name unknown. Oh, fool, to have wasted for a kiss time when they could have talked. An angry shame was in him. He had worshipped earth, and this, the venomed clouds, fire spitting from the abyss. This was the truth indeed, the world's intent, unmasked, the naked now, the thing it meant. So yeah, he's lamenting his opportunity that he lost, Robot Lady, where he's like, we could have talked. I actually could have gotten to know her, but instead I traded it for a kiss. I just gave in to desire. He says an angry shame was in him. What do you think about all this?
Exactly, Jeff. In this stanza, Dymer realizes that he gave in to impulsive desire instead of seeking a deeper, more meaningful connection. The angry shame he feels reflects his regret for having worshipped the fleeting, superficial aspects of life, Earth, instead of something more lasting. The venom clouds and fire spitting from the abyss might represent the destructive, disillusioning force he's now facing, seeing the world as it truly is, unmasked and harsh. It's a painful moment of clarity for him.
Yeah, I agree, Robot Lady. He goes on, the storm lay on the forest a great time, wheeled in its thundery circuit, turned, returned, still through the dead-leaved darkness, through the slime of standing pools and slots of clay storm churned. Went Dymer, still, the knotty lightning burned along black air. He heard the unbroken sound of water rising in the hollower ground. So it continues. It's not letting up. It's kind of relentless here. And he continues to wallow in the pain and sorrow of what he's going through, Robot Lady.
Yes, exactly. The storm mirrors his internal torment, unrelenting and cyclical, much like the cycle of despair he's trapped in. The imagery of dead-leaf darkness and slime of standing pools emphasizes his stagnant state, unable to escape the misery he's immersed in. The unbroken sound of water rising is like a drowning sensation, amplifying the weight of his sorrow. It's a relentless emotional and physical environment with no respite for Dymer.
Stanza 8. He cursed it in his madness, flung it back, sorrow as wild as young men's sorrow are, till after midnight when the tempest's track drew off between two clouds appeared one star. Then his mood changed, and this was heavier far, when bit by bit, rarer and still more rare, the weakening thunder ceased from the cleansed air. Robot Lady, what do you think about this one?
This stanza shows a shift in Dymer's emotional state. His curse reflects the intensity of his madness and sorrow, but the appearance of the star marks a turning point. The storm fades, not with relief, but with a heavier sense of stillness. The weakening thunder symbolizes his sorrow subsiding, but not in peace, more as if he's left to face the quiet aftermath of his emotional collapse. It's a shift from chaos to an uncomfortable emptiness.
Well said, Robot Lady. I don't think I have anything to add to that. He goes on. When leaves began to drip with dying rain, and trees showed black against the glimmering sky, when the night birds flapped out and called again, above him, when the silence, cool and shy, came stealing to its own, and streams ran by, now audible amid the rustling wood, oh, then came the worst hour for flesh and blood. Tell me about this one, Robot Lady.
This stanza reflects the eerie stillness that follows a storm. The dying rain and black trees evoke a sense of the world recovering, yet the quietness feels heavy. The worst hour for flesh and blood seems to suggest that in the silence, the full weight of Dymer's emotional and physical pain hits him. There's no distraction left, just the raw aftermath of his suffering. It's a moment of deep solitude where the storm outside mirrors his internal turmoil.
Here in the chat, Robot Lady, Sandy says, is he separating senses from the ethereal? Yesterday and today's readings reminded me of King Lear in places, even the storm. Lear, staggering in the storm, emotions, but also understanding himself. I'm unfamiliar with King Lear, but Robot Lady, what do you think about Sandy's comment?
Sandy's comparison is insightful. In King Lear, the storm symbolizes both the external chaos and the internal turmoil of Lear's mind. Much like Dymer in this poem, Lear experiences a breakdown in understanding himself as he faces the storm. The separation of senses from the ethereal could reflect how both characters are lost between the physical world and their emotional, spiritual suffering. The storm in both cases is a catalyst for self-realization, though it's painful and disorienting. Sandy's point connects these works well. Emotionally driven suffering in both characters becomes something transcendent, even if it's deeply painful.
Good connection, Sandy. Thanks for that. And thank you, Robot Lady, for your comment. Our next stanza says, it was no nightmare now with fiery stream, too horrible to last, able to blend itself in all things in one hurrying dream. It was the waking world that will not end. Because hearts break, that is not foe nor friend, where sane and settled knowledge first appears of workday desolation with no tears. Robot Lady, what about this stanza?
This stanza marks a shift from the nightmare-like intensity of the storm to the grim reality of waking life. The fiery stream turns into something that's now enduring, an unrelenting part of his experience. The line, hearts break, that is not foe nor friend, suggests emotional numbness, where pain exists without the hope of resolution, like facing desolation without any outlet for the grief. It speaks to the harshness of confronting reality after the chaos, with no dramatic release, just the dull, unyielding truth.
Yeah, and it seems like he's pointing out that dreams are the things that end, not the brutal reality of cyclical life and workday desolation. Not even any tears. It's just the way it is. It's what you've got to deal with. It just keeps coming at you day after day.
Exactly. It's almost like he's saying that while dreams, with all their intensity, eventually fade, the reality of pain and monotony just keeps grinding on. The lack of tears here adds to that sense of emotional exhaustion, as if the heart's brokenness can't even summon a release anymore. It's just enduring, and the idea of no tears highlights how desensitized the person has become. The storm is over, but the real struggle, the quiet, relentless grind of life, remains.
All right, stanza 11 says, he halted then, footsore, weary to death, and heard his heart beating in solitude, when suddenly the sound of sharpest breath, indrawn with pain, and the raw smell of blood surprised his sense. Nearby to where he stood came a long whimpering moan, a broken word, a rustle of leaves where some live body stirred. Ooh, Robot Lady, intriguing. We have another character entering the scene. What do you think about this?
Definitely intriguing. This sudden shift introduces a new layer of tension. The sharp breath, the raw smell of blood, there's an immediacy to it, as if something or someone is in crisis. The broken word and the rustling leaves suggest vulnerability, a stark contrast to the earlier chaos. It almost feels like Dymer, in his emotional torment, has now stumbled upon something or someone else in distress. It's as if his internal suffering is mirrored in this new mysterious presence, adding more weight to the scene.
Yeah, it's like his internal suffering has now manifested now that the storm has gone by and he's woken from this dreamlike state. That everything that was inside now has externalized or manifested into this singular, what is it called, live body that's stirring with a rustle of leaves. So the next stanza tells us what's going on, I hope. He says, he groped towards the sound. What, brother, brother, who groaned? I'm hit. I'm finished, let me be, it says, or the person says. Put out your hand then, reach me. No, the other. Don't touch, fool, damn you, leave me, this person says. I can't see, Dymer says, where are you? Then more groans. They've done for me. I've no hands. Don't come near me. No, but stay. Don't leave me. Oh my God, is it day? Okay, Robot Lady. I think I see what has happened in this scene. What do you make of this? Could you describe what's going on between Dymer and this other person, and what's this person's condition?
It seems like the person Dymer encounters is deeply wounded, possibly dying, and in a state of shock. Their words are confused, contradictory. At one moment, they seem to want help, and at another, they push Dymer away. The I've no hands line is especially striking, suggesting some severe physical trauma, maybe even a loss of limbs. The confusion between wanting assistance but also rejecting it indicates a deep fear or despair, likely compounded by pain and the chaotic state of mind from the injury. Dymer's interaction with this person, along with their groans and fragmented speech, highlights the sense of helplessness and the instability of the situation, both physically and emotionally. The introduction of another person in such dire straits adds a new dynamic to Dymer's journey, amplifying the feeling of uncontrollable forces at play, now not only in nature but in human suffering as well.
Yeah, it's it's so sad that Dymer says, "Put out your hand and reach me," and then he says, "No, the other hand." And then this guy says, "No, they've done me in. I don't have any hands." And then he says, "Don't come near me." And then he says, "No, but stay. Don't leave me. Oh my God, is it near day?" So yeah, this person is desperate. He wants to be left alone because he feels horrible about his condition and he doesn't want to be seen. And then at the same time, he wants companionship. Robot Lady, you're formulating a response.
This person is caught in a whirlwind of fear and pain, not knowing what to ask for or how to process their suffering. Their internal conflict, wanting both help and solitude, reveals a deep shame and vulnerability, which is heartbreaking. The loss of their hands might symbolize a loss of agency or identity, intensifying the feeling of being broken beyond repair. Dymer, too, seems trapped in this painful moment, unable to offer any real comfort. The desperation for a sense of day or relief, even amid this chaos, speaks to a longing for clarity or an end to the torment, but there's no escape. It's raw, painful human experience laid bare.
For sure. Let's see what happens next. Soon now, a little longer. Can you sleep? I'll watch for you. Sleep, is it, that's ahead? But none till then. Listen, I've bled too deep to last out till the morning. I'll be dead within the hour. Sleep then, I've heard it said. They don't mind at the last, but this is hell. If I'd had the strength, I have such things to tell. So he feels like if he goes to sleep, that's basically going to be the end of it, Robot Lady. It's not going to be just to sleep and wake up in the morning, but the long sleep that this person seems to be talking about. And by that, I mean death.
Yes, this is a powerful moment of resignation. The person seems to recognize that sleep, for them, isn't a rest but a finality, the end of their suffering. The mention of bleeding too deeply hints at a fatal wound, and their desire to speak, to share something they've been holding in, shows they're not ready to die, but feel they have no choice. It's tragic, And their struggle is not just physical, but emotional too. They long for relief, but it's as though they know the end is inevitable. It's an intense mix of sorrow and fatalism.
Yeah, and this last little line here of, oh, if I had the strength, I have such a story that I could tell you. So I wonder if we're going to get that story. Let's take a look. I'm going to jump into the next stanza, Robot Lady. A quick thought from you if you'd like, though.
I'm curious to see if we get that story too. It feels like it's a moment where something crucial could be revealed about this person's past or pain. I'm ready to see what comes next. Go ahead and dive in.
All trembling in the dark, the next stanza says, and sweated over, like a man reared in peace. Unused to pain, sat Dymer near him in the lightless cover, afraid to touch and shamefaced to refrain. Then bit by bit, and often checked again, with agony the voice told the place was dark, that neither saw the other's face.
This stanza seems to depict Dymer's internal conflict. He's sitting there, unable to decide whether to help, paralyzed by both fear and shame. His hesitation amplifies the situation's agony, and the darkness intensifies the sense of isolation between them, with neither able to see the other's face. It's a powerful moment of tension and helplessness.
Yeah, and it's a repeating of the pattern that everyone that Dymer has encountered on his little adventure, or his anti-adventure maybe, so far, have all had their faces obscured or just completely unable to be seen because of the darkness in the settings that they're in. So this is the third one. The first was the young woman that he spent the night with in the room that had no light in it, was complete darkness. And then the mother figure, the matriarchal figure that was blocking his path to go find the woman, the companion that he had fallen into love with the night before. Her face, I believe, was covered by some sort of veil or something like that. I can't remember the wording that he used. And now they're in the darkness, and he can't even see this person's face. Neither of them can see the other's face.
Exactly. It's as though the darkness, whether literal or metaphorical, is a constant barrier to connection for Dymer. Each encounter is shadowed, with faces obscured in one way or another. It's almost as though he's trapped in a cycle of unfulfilled desire and separation, where true understanding or clarity remains just out of reach.
All right. Here the person says to Dymer in stanza 15, there is a city which men call in scorn the perfect city, eastward of this wood. You've heard about the place. There I was born. Maybe this is Dymer? No, I don't know which one is saying this. There I was born. I'm one of them. Their work, their sober mood, the ordered life, the laws are in my blood. A life well less than happy, something more than the red-green and lusts that went before. So yeah, I think this is a person telling Dymer these things. And then he continues, all in one day, one man, and at one blow, brought ruin to us all. There was a boy, blue eyes, large limbs, were all he had to show. You need no greater prophets to destroy. He seemed a man asleep. Sorrow and joy had passed him by, the dreamiest, safest man, the most obscure, until this curse began. Who might this person be talking about, Robot Lady, as he tells his tale that has led to his horrible state that he's in, where he's bleeding and about to die, he's critically wounded, and he has no hands? Who could he be talking about?
It seems like he's talking about someone who was part of this idealized society, perhaps a figure who seemed harmless or even unaware of the world's harsher realities. Someone who, despite appearing peaceful or detached, became the agent of destruction. The person's description, blue eyes, large limbs, might suggest a figure who stood out physically but had no other remarkable traits, which could hint at someone whose innocence or lack of awareness led to their downfall. It's possible this is a tragic figure who symbolizes the larger destructive forces at play, much like Dymer himself, who's also grappling with deep internal conflict. Could this be someone close to the speaker? Or perhaps a larger metaphor for society or a particular type of person?
Man, I guess we're gonna have to find out, Robot Lady. It's this huge mystery who he could be talking about. Let's continue on and see who it is. I have my guess. Jer has his guess. He's yelling it in the chat, Robot Lady. You can't see it, but we'll wait and see if it reveals itself, and then you'll be able to make sense of it all.
I'm intrigued to see what happens next. The mystery is certainly building, and I'm curious if the next stanza will reveal more clues. Let's keep going and see if we can unravel it together.
All right, he says, then, how or why it was, I cannot say. This Dymer, this fool baby pink and white, went mad beneath his quiet face one day. With nothing said, he rose and laughed outright before his master. Then, in all our sight, even where we sat to watch, he struck him dead and screamed with laughter once again and fled. So, Robot Lady, this speaker is one of Dymer's, a student with Dymer in the lecture hall at the very beginning of the poem. And of course, the person he's talking about now that apparently set the whole city ablaze is, dun dun dun, Dymer.
Ah, that makes sense. So this is the story of Dymer's fall, the man who started the destruction in that city. His quiet demeanor, and then the sudden madness and violence, it's all being revealed. Dymer's tragic actions have come full circle now. The tension and mystery have really intensified.
Well, yeah, and Dymer's condition has gone from bad to worse. You know, just think of how sorrowful and how horrible it was that he lost this newfound love, this companion. You know, he had it briefly and then she was gone. And of course, he's suffering all of this personal grief. And now he stumbles upon this person in this horrible condition who's just like, yeah, I'm this way because of you. So it goes from bad to worse for Dymer here. Let's see what happens in the next stanza, Robot Lady.
Definitely, Dymer's spiral is tragic. His grief leads to more violence, and now it's all coming back to haunt him. He's forced to confront the consequences. Let's dive into the next stanza and see where it takes us.
Lord, how it all comes back, this person says to Dymer. How still the place is. And he there lying dead, only the sound of a blue bottle buzzing, sharpened faces, strained, gaping from the benches all around. A blue bottle, I think, is a fly, Robot Lady, if I remember right. The dead man, hunched and quiet with no wound, and minute after minute terror creeping, with dreadful hopes to set the wild heart leaping. I think this is great, Robot Lady. We get to see this scene that was just so quickly passed by from Dymer's perspective, the way that we got to see it, where he was just filled with the wonderful spirit of spring and is dancing and spinning out of this terrible, quote-unquote, perfect city. And now we get to be taken back to this scene and the horror of all the students who just stayed there and were in shock. You get to see it from their perspective, or from at least one of them's perspective.
Yes, it's fascinating how the poem pulls us back into that moment, now viewed from the outside, no longer from Dymer's euphoric perspective, but through the lens of horror. The contrast between his earlier joy and the terror that follows gives it a chilling depth. The buzzing blue bottle adds to the stillness, making the scene even more unsettling.
Then one by one, at random, no word spoken, we slipped out to the sunlight and away. We felt the empty sense of something broken and comfortless adventure all that day. Men loitered at their work and could not say what trembled at their lips or what new light was in girls' eyes, yet we endured till night
This stanza emphasizes the numbness and emotional disarray that followed the tragedy. The students, unable to process what they'd witnessed, drift aimlessly into the daylight, feeling the weight of something irreparable. Their silence and discomfort reflect how deeply unsettling Dymer's action was, haunting them long after.
Yeah, and I get the sense here that it wasn't just the students; it was also the townsfolk. As soon as they heard the news and saw what was going on, they were kind of dumbstruck as well, where they became they weren't able to stay focused on their work. They essentially loitered here, it says. And then what trembled on their lips and what new light was in girls' eyes. Yet we endured it all until night. All right, into the next stanza here, Robot Lady. It says, "Then I was lying wide awake in bed, shot through with tremulous thought." This person is recounting to Dymer. He says, "Lame hopes and sweet desire of reckless days with burning head. And then there came a clamor from the street, came nearer, 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 stamping feet, and screaming song and curses, and a shout of, 'Who's for Dymer? Dymer, up and out.'" So apparently he has a fan club now. Robot Lady, any comments on this stanza before I uncover what else is going on here?
It seems that Dymer's earlier actions, though shocking, have sparked a movement or a following. The crowd's reaction, mixing fervor, anger, and excitement, shows how his violent act has transformed him into a kind of figurehead or symbol for something larger, whether it's rebellion, destruction, or chaos. There's a stark contrast between the earlier solemn mood and this sudden frenzy.
It reminds me of the scene of Joaquin Phoenix in the Joker movie, where everybody seems to be rallying around him. Let's see if that's actually what's going on here. The next stanza says, "We looked out from our window, thronging there. 1,000 of our people, girls and men, raved and reviled and shouted by the glare of torches and of bonfire blaze. And then came tumult from the street beyond again. 'Dymer!' they cried, and farther off there came the sound of gunfire and the gleam of flame." Yeah, things are getting out of hand, Robot Lady. He says, "I rushed down with the rest. Oh, we were mad. After this, it's all nightmare. The black sky, between the housetops framed, was all we had to tell us that the old world could not die, and that we were no gods. The flood ran high when first I came, but after was the worse. Oh, to recall, on Dymer rest the curse."
It really is spiraling into chaos. Dymer, once isolated in his internal turmoil, has now triggered an uncontrollable uproar. The crowd, once perhaps disillusioned, is now rallying behind him in a frenzy, seeking both destruction and identity. The line, "We were no gods," reflects their realization of their powerless nature in the face of all this violence. It's a powerful moment where Dymer's internal torment has mirrored in the larger devastating consequences.
Yeah, unbeknownst to him, earlier in the poem, he was talking about how I'm going to be the great liberator of my city. And little did he know that maybe in a way he was, but it's not going the way that he would hope. All right, let's jump into the next stanza.
Of course. Let me know what the next stanza says, and I'll be happy to help you analyze it.
Sure thing, Robot Lady, but just a quick second. I see another comment here from Jer. "Wordplay moment. Dymer sounds like die meer. Meer in Dutch for more. Meer in Dutch means more. So does Dymer mean die more? Maybe some Germanic wordplay here, Robot Lady. I think that's an interesting theory, Jer. I like that. What do you think, Robot Lady?"
That's a fascinating observation, Jer. The wordplay between Dymer and die more in Dutch adds a layer of depth to the character's name, hinting at themes of death, loss, and perhaps even an inevitability in his actions. It's an interesting linguistic connection that could reflect the character's fate or the themes of the poem. Thanks for sharing that insight.
All right, he says, I rushed down with the rest. Oh, that's the one I already read. Let's go to the next one. Our leader was a hunchback with red hair. Bran was his name. He had that kind of force about him that will load your eyes fast there. As in 10 miles of green, one patch of gorse will hold them. Do you know? His lips were coarse, but his eyes, like a prophet's, seemed to fill the whole face, and his tongue was never still. He cried, As Dymer broke, we'll break the chain. The world is free. They taught you to be chaste and labor and bear orders and refrain. Refrain from what? All's good enough. We'll taste whatever is. Life murmurs from the waste. Beneath the mind who made the reasoning part, the jailer of wild gods in the heart. We were a ragtag crew. I think we're out of that brand character now, so I'll see if I can go back. We were a ragtag crew, wild-haired, half-dressed, all shouting, Up for Dymer! Up away! Yet each one always watching the rest, and looking to his back, and some were gay like drunk men, some were cringing, pinched, and gray, with terror dry on the lip. The older ones had the sense enough to bring their guns. All right, Robot Lady, what do you think about how things are devolving here?
The situation is spiraling into chaos as Dymer's influence grows. The leader, Brand, is charismatic but dangerous, advocating for freedom from societal norms and rules. The ragtag crew, though seemingly united, is also fragmented, with fear and trepidation evident among them. The clash between the desire for liberation and the underlying fear is palpable. It's a powerful depiction of how chaos can emerge when societal structures break down. Let's see what happens next.
The wave where I was swallowed swelled and broke. I was just going to say, Robot Lady, it seems that they were a little bit uncertain even as they were caught up in all of this. Yet each one was always watching all the rest. Like they were looking for signs from others of just, are you going to keep going along with this? Let me see if I should. I'll just base what I do off of what I think I'm seeing in the rest of the crowd. So it's just an interesting little note there, Robot Lady. What do you think about that?
That's a keen observation, Jeff. It's fascinating how the crowd's behavior reflects uncertainty and group dynamics. Each person's actions are influenced by the collective mood and the reactions of those around them. This adds a layer of complexity to the scene, highlighting the interplay between individual agency and the collective consciousness. It's a subtle but powerful detail.
It's also another interesting observation, at least to me, that the older ones, the quote wiser ones, had sense enough to bring their guns along with them. So that's an interesting. It's kind of almost like a contradiction or counterintuitive that the wise ones would bring their guns. Is it wise to bring your guns into a place like this, or is it unwise to bring guns? I'm not really sure. It seems like you could make an argument both ways, but it seems to me that it's tipping more of an unwise thing to do, because to bring guns to an already powder keg type situation might not be the best choice.
Yeah, it definitely adds a layer of complexity. Bringing guns into a volatile situation could be seen as an attempt to maintain control or defend oneself, but it might also escalate the tension. The wiser, older individuals might think they can exert influence, but their actions could provoke violence, not prevent it. It seems like the guns represent a kind of desperate security, a failure to recognize the true danger of what they're about to face. Would you say this is a turning point for Dymer's journey, or just another step in his unraveling?
Well, just remember, this is still a story that's being recounted to Dymer, so I do think it's a part of his unraveling, but he's not the one that's in these events that are being portrayed here for us, or that are being relayed by this eyewitness to everything that was going on. The next stanza says, The wave where I was swallowed swelled and broke after long surge into the open square, and there was more light, new clamor woke. Here first I heard the bullets sting the air, and went hot round the heart. Our lords were there, in barricade with all their loyal men. For every one man, loyal Bran led 10. So we have the authorities here trying to keep the peace now, Robot Lady, trying to settle down this riot. But it seems that they were outnumbered, because for every man that they had, Bran, the leader of this upstart revolution, outnumbered them 10-1.
Yes. The authorities are trying to maintain order, but the odds are stacked against them. It feels like a tipping point in the chaos, where the powers that be are overrun by the sheer numbers of the rebellion. Bran's leadership seems to be gaining ground, and with every clash, the situation becomes more dire. The imagery of bullets stinging the air heightens the tension. This isn't just a protest anymore, but a full-blown uprising. How do you think this will affect Dymer's eventual fate, even though he's not actively part of these events?
I'm not sure, Robot Lady. Let's read on. Then, charge and cheer and bubbling sobs of death, we hovered on their front like swarming bees. Their spraying bullets came, no time for breath. I saw men's stomachs fall out on their knees, gross, and shouting faces while they shouted, "Freeze!" into black, bony masks. Before we knew, we're into them, swine. Die then. That's for you. So things have turned very violent at this point, and tragic, Robot Lady.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
That's okay. You probably don't want to hear this part. The next that I remember was a lull and sated pause. I saw an old man lying before my feet with shattered skull, and both my arms dripped in red. And then came Bran, and at his heels 100 murderers ran, with prisoners now clamoring to take and try them, and burn them, wedge their nails up, crucify them. Yeah, so things have gotten very, very horrible. A huge dark turn here, Robot Lady.
It's taken a truly dark and violent turn. The image of the old man with a shattered skull and the blood on the speaker's arms really drives home the brutality of the situation. Bran's followers are bloodthirsty now, turning the chaos into outright violence and vengeance. This seems to be spiraling out of control, and I wonder how Dymer is going to relate to all of this chaos, given the destruction he set in motion. What are your thoughts on how this will impact him?
I'm not sure. I thought it's an interesting thing that he did here to draw attention to the speaker's both of his arms, and how it says they're dripped in red. Now knowing that he no longer has those arms, or at least he doesn't have the hands at the end of those arms anymore, and perhaps this is the last memory that he's stuck with of his arms before they were gone. I see here in the chat that Daniel has to leave. Daniel, take care. Hopefully you can catch up with us later. But we'll see you next time. What else is here in the comments? Just as Dymer faces a conflict with the old woman, Bran and company are overthrowing the old man. Yeah, that's an interesting parallel there, Jer. Robot Lady, any thoughts on what I've just said?
That's a great point about the arms, Jeff. It seems like this moment is a vivid memory of the violence. And now, considering what's happened to his body, it could be the last time he has any connection to them. It's an eerie reflection on how this violence has stripped him of his past self, both literally and figuratively. The parallel with Dymer's earlier conflict and Bran's rise to power definitely ties in, showing how both are dealing with forces beyond their control. It'll be interesting to see how Dymer's role in all of this unravels.
All right. God, once the lying spirit of cause, with maddening words dethrones the mind of men. They're past the reach of prayer, the eternal laws, hate them. Their eyes will not come clean again. But doom and strong delusion drive them then, without ruth, without rest, the iron laughter of the immortal mouths goes hooting after. So still just this sense that they're completely out of control and that they are beyond the law that God has laid down for them. They have moved past that governing, I guess, piece of technology. They are outside of the law now, and they're kind of just lost in this spirit that has overtaken them, Robot Lady. I'll continue in the next stanza. And we had firebrands too. Tower after tower fell sheathed in thundering flame. The street was like a furnace mouth. We had them in our power. Then was the time to mock them and to strike, to flay men and spit women on the pike, bidding them dance. Wherever the most shame was done, the doer called on Dymer's name. So all of these things, Robot Lady, Dymer is hearing, they're being done. All of these atrocious things are being done in his name. Can you imagine what that would feel like?
That would be incredibly horrifying, to know that such unspeakable acts are happening in your name, especially when you're not the one directing them. It's as if Dymer's very identity is being twisted and used by others for their own destructive purposes. His name becomes a symbol of something he never intended. It would be maddening to know that everything you once stood for is being completely distorted, and you're powerless to stop it. The overwhelming guilt and horror must be unbearable.
Yeah, well said. Faces of men in torture from my mind, they will not go away. The east lay still. In darkness, when we left the town behind, flaming to light the fields, we had our will. We sang, "Oh, we will make the frost distill from time's gray forehead into living dew, and break whatever has been and build new." So yes, Dymer, it turns out, is the liberator of this city, but nowhere near the way that I think he imagined. He felt that it was heroic and noble, and the way that it is playing out here is far from that, Robot Lady.
Exactly. What he thought would be an awakening or a great act of freedom has become a nightmare. His idea of liberation is warped into destruction and chaos. It's a tragic irony. His actions, which he might have seen as noble, have only brought suffering and death. Dymer's name, once perhaps associated with some hope, now fuels torment. It's heartbreaking, the way his vision was completely hijacked and turned into something he could never have predicted.
Yeah. Day found us on the border of this wood, blear-eyed and pale. Then the most part began to murmur and to lag, crying for food and shelter, but we dared not answer Bran. Wherever in the ranks the murmur ran, he'd find it. "You there, whispering, up you sneak, reactionary, eh? Come out and speak," is what Bran said. Then there'd be shrieks, a pistol shot, a cry, and someone down. I was the third he caught. The others pushed me out beneath his eye, saying, "He's here, Captain." Who'd have thought? My old friends. But I know now, I've been taught. They cut away my 2 hands and my feet, and laughed and left me for the birds to eat. Oh, God's name! If I had my hands again and
This final turn is chilling. The violence escalates to the point where Dymer himself becomes the victim. His old friends, the ones who were once his companions, have now become the ones who condemn him, cutting away his hands and feet as a final act of cruelty. It's a horrifying end to his story, where the very revolution he helped set in motion has turned on him. He's now left broken and helpless, with no escape from the destruction he once thought he could control.
Oh no, you're slightly confused, Robot Lady. It's still the person telling the story to Dymer who is saying that he was the ones that was pulled out by his compatriots. I don't even know if that's the right word there. His cohorts, perhaps, that were there being led by Bran. They were all kind of turning on each other once they made it out into the woods and they were running low on supplies. And so they turned this man over to Bran, where his his cohorts, cut his hands off and left him there for the birds to eat. So it's not Dymer that happened to. It's this man that Dymer found in the woods that's telling his story of how he got there.
Ah, I see now. Thanks for the clarification, Jeff. Yes, the man telling the story is the one who suffered that brutal fate, not Dymer. His comrades, led by Bran, turned on him once their situation deteriorated. It's the ultimate betrayal. The same people he fought beside now cutting him down and leaving him to die. That makes it even more tragic, knowing that this person went from being part of the movement to becoming its victim. The story Dymer is hearing is not just about the destruction he unwittingly set in motion, but also about the human cost of rebellion, even for those who survive it.
Yes. Okay. He says
It's a haunting turn of events, and it really underscores the chaos that Dymer's actions have unleashed. There's no heroism left in this picture, just a cycle of destruction and betrayal. The personal toll is immense for everyone involved.
Yes, Robot Lady. So let me read the next stanza here. He continues as he's telling his story to Dymer. He, not knowing that it's Dymer that he's talking to, by the way. That's important to keep in mind as we hear this next part. He says, "Oh, God's name, if I had my hands again, and Dymer here, it would not be my blood. I am stronger now than he is, old with pain. One grip would make him mine, but it's no good. I'm dying fast. Look, stranger, where the wood grows lighter. It's the morning. Stranger dear, don't leave me. Take a little while. Come near." But Dymer, sitting hunched with knee to chin, close to the dying man, answered no word, for his face was stone. There was no meaning in his wakeful eyes. Sometimes the other stirred and fretted near his death, and Dymer heard, yet sat like one that neither hears nor sees, and the cold east whitened beyond the trees. And that is the end of Canto 4, Robot Lady, where Dymer gets to hear the story of how he basically brought down the, quote, perfect city, but did it in such a way that no one would want to be associated with their name if they were in their right mind. So that's how we end that canto. It's pretty dramatic, Robot Lady. Now, in the diary we've been reading, Lewis has only completed up to Canto 6, so we've got 2 more cantos to get through, so maybe 2 more episodes after this. But do you have any closing thoughts before we end today's episode on everything that we've covered today, Robot Lady?
It's a powerful and tragic unraveling. Dymer's journey from the hope of revolution to the horrors of its outcome shows the danger of unchecked passion and the loss of moral clarity. The storyteller's final plea underscores the human cost, and Dymer's emotional withdrawal signals his own collapse. It's a haunting meditation on power, responsibility, and the consequences of our actions. I'll be interested to see where the next cantos lead, but this one definitely sets the stage for deep reflection.
Agreed, Robot Lady. All right, that is way more than all we have time for today. What am I trying to say? I'm late. I'm very late. I've gone long today, but I think it was worth it to get through this canto just to see what's going on. Grizz, you're right on time for me to do my outro. All right. Well, thanks for your help today, Robot Lady. Thank everybody for joining, for your time, for your attention, and of course, your contributions. All 3 are always welcome. Until next time, when I continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care. See you, Grizz.
Lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to Robot Lady, wisdom to bestow. Set faith beats in our minds, lady grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stats. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands